Being a Joburger, I'm sure you would agree if you live in Johannesburg, is not as attractive as it used to be. Once a world-class city is now associated with dilapidated buildings, crime, as well as poor service delivery. Now, the recent gas explosion exposed the city's underlying infrastructural challenges. And eNCA senior reporter Silindelo Masikane is in the city of gold and joins me now, of course, to paint us that picture of the urban decay that we're seeing out in Johannesburg. Silindelo, a very warm good morning to you. Colleague, and you're absolutely right. I mean, when I think about what Joburg used to be, an aspirant location and platform for everyone because of how aesthetically pleasing it was. But does it look the same in 2023?
I think we can confidently say it certainly does not. Johannesburg has, deteriorated to a point where many residents not only feel unsafe being in the city, but, you really want to spend as very little time as possible when you are in this city. And it's quite saddening to think that this was once a city that was very sought after in terms of economic opportunities and, of course, like you said, aesthetically pleasing, with beautiful, big, tall skyliner buildings where, when you were in the city, you certainly felt as though you were in a world-class African city. But when you speak to residents, when you hear of their experiences, their daily lived experiences, many of them can tell you that being in the city of Johannesburg certainly isn't what it used to be. But to unpack this more for us, I am joined by one of the DA leaders here in Gauteng, that is Mr. Simanga. Earlier on, of course, we were speaking to the ANC's chairperson here in Johannesburg as well, unpacking their views in terms of just how much of the political instability that we've seen in the city has to do with the decay that continues. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Mr. Simanga. Let's just start with, of course, the fact that, where we were perhaps in '94 in how, Johannesburg looked in the infrastructure as well as the economic opportunities that you could get here. Just how badly has Johannesburg deteriorated in your view?
Well, I think it's deteriorated very, very badly, and it's going to run into billions to try and get the systems back and running again and to be able to get to where the infrastructure should be. We're talking close on 100 billion rand just to look at the infrastructure in Johannesburg alone. When you look at your under surface infrastructure, when you're talking about your pipes, I mean, in certain parts of your northern suburbs of Johannesburg, you're still dealing with old asbestos pipes. And when you go towards your Soweto area and all of that, the electricity infrastructure, because of the tampering that has been taking place in some of the areas, is actually then now also deteriorated. This is why you would also have in certain parts where if there's rain or there's winds, that there will be electricity outages that will not necessarily be linked to ESCOM, but will be linked to the infrastructure that is so very much unstable. You come into the CBD, you look at the cleanliness of the CBD, and I think if you were to then move away from what had happened since 1994, you'd realize that the fact that we had actually outsourced a whole lot of things that shouldn't have been outsourced, that should have actually been kept internally, that's where the deterioration had actually started creeping in. And therefore, we need to revisit and look at what has been the maintenance budgets that have been put in place and the preventative maintenance budgets that have been put in place. Once you're able to then answer that question, you realize that a lot has gone wrong that needs to be corrected if we are to get anywhere back to where Johannesburg and other municipalities around Gauteng have been.
Talk to me then about the political responsibility or the political will. We've seen the coalitions really not seeming to get it right here in Johannesburg. How much blame can this situation then be put on the fact that it doesn't seem as though politicians really have the best interests of the residents of Johannesburg at heart?
Well, look, I think you can blame politicians, and I think they should take some blame for it in terms of how do you then play. But also we need to then get back into the system where administrators are held to account as well for the work that they're supposed to be doing. it is good and well to want to blame politicians, but at the end of the day, it is the city managers, it's the officials that are supposed to make sure that the work gets to be done. And this is why we have been calling for a very, very long time. And unfortunately, this is something that the ANC has been kicking against, where we say we need to hold people to account. Officials need to be held to account in terms of the work they're supposed to be doing. I find it surprising that you'll find officials just driving using vehicles of a municipality or of the provincial government, passing where they're supposed to be concerned about issues, cleanliness of a city, infrastructure being damaged. Then people just go about their way as if nothing wrong is happening. And we need to get back to that, where we then say, well, if you are being paid to do a job, then go do your job. And if you're not going to do your job, then you need to be fired. Because it cannot be that we're paying officials exorbitant amounts of money and they go and sit in their lavish offices and then not go out there and do what needs to be done. So I think politicians can actually be taken to task in terms of the decisions that they take in council, but also it is upon the mayor and also the members of the mayoral committee to hold officials to account in terms of what needs to be done, in terms of service delivery. So if we have potholes and there is a budget for potholes, then the question is, what is the head of department in roads and transport doing about this matter? If we have, trucks that are supposed to be removing waste and actual waste is not being removed, we need to be asking, what is the head of department when it comes to urban cleaning, and waste management doing? I mean, if we're able to then start answering those questions and making sure that we get people that are suitable, qualified, and suitably able to do the job, then we're able to then start addressing the challenges that we're sitting with. And I think at this point in time, the blame has been surely and squarely been put onto the politicians, but we then tend and shy away from holding officials also to account. And this is something that I do believe that if we are to get it right, also needs to to change in the long run, or else we're not going to then get to the bottom of the decay that we are seeing here. I mean, I'm sure you've seen Silindelo, where you drive around, where sometimes you see officials lying or sleeping in the parks under the trees, or actually then just going shopping during office hours. And this is something that also needs to be addressed, to then say, are we really going to get to a stage where people are doing what they are paid to do? And this never used to happen, where people used to be held to account in terms of the work that they're supposed to be doing. And this is something that needs to be revisited. And once we're able to then do that, the politicians can be held to account, and we need to make sure that the officials as well are held to account for what is happening.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. That is one of the leaders here in Gauteng from the Democratic Alliance. That is Mr. Soli Msimanga. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Just unpacking for us what we are focusing on today as the eNCA in terms of the state of our cities. And of course, we will be speaking to residents throughout the day. And Dumelo, it does seem as though the theme in terms of getting things right here in Johannesburg is going to be accountability.
Quite a significant perspective, colleague, in terms of the political impacts regarding why our cities look the way they do. And thanks to you, Silindelo Masikane, our eNCA senior reporter, having the conversation with Soli Msimanga, just to look at how politics have also affected service delivery in terms of making sure that there are access to services out in our cities, but also our infrastructure and our buildings, of course, do not continue to decay, but progress and flourish. Well, which seems to be the opposite.